All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to OWU's own Bishop Plus virtual information session series. It looks like there are most people getting into the chat room. We may have others join during this brief introduction. My name is Lori Patton, and I am the Director of Admission here at Ohio Wesleyan. In addition, I'm a graduate, class of 1995, and I'm also the parent of two now OWU students. My daughter is finishing her sophomore year, and interestingly, she just happens to be double majoring in zoology and environmental studies. And my son, who's a high school senior, will be entering as a first-year student with some of you who are seniors this August. So I will be the moderator of tonight's session called Research and Zoos and Bishops, oh my, Zoology at OWU. So today, as you know, marks 5 weeks since our stay-at-home order, when we were all forced to transition in rapid fashion how we do most everything: school, jobs, sports, shopping, everything. Our faculty did yeoman work in changing their engaging, interactive, in-person classes and labs to virtual online courses in just a matter of days. The admission office also had to brainstorm just how exactly we could deliver the same kind of experience, or at least a similar one, that students and families got when they visited campus in person to these virtual online experiences. And I'll be honest, it wasn't easy. There's just something so special about OWU. The interactions that you have, the relationships that you form, and the memories that you make with fellow students, faculty, and staff. This is really difficult to capture in a virtual format. We hope, though, that this series, the Bishop Plus series, has been helpful to you, our audience, whether you're a high school senior who has already decided to attend OWU next fall, a parent who is curious about to know more about what OWU offers, or a high school sophomore or junior who's just beginning the college search. We hope that you find this episode and any others that you have already attended or plan to attend helpful. We really enjoyed doing them, so much so that we've added a number of additional episodes throughout the month of May, which I'll talk more about at the close of our session today. So tonight's session, as the title suggests, is all about zoology program at OWU, one of our most popular programs on campus for sure. And joining me tonight are Dr. Dustin Rikard and Dr. Amy Downing, both professors of zoology. Dr. Reichard and Dr. Downing, welcome to the session. I wonder if you each can start by telling our audience a little bit more about yourself, maybe how long you've been at Ohio Wesleyan, what courses you teach, some of your research interests, anything you'd like to share. So Amy, would you like to begin?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm Amy Downing. I've been here since 2001, so I'm closing in on 20 years, believe it or not. I teach courses that include conservation biology, marine biology, one of our intro courses, organisms and their environment, biology of East Africa, island biology, so population and community ecology. So I'm kind of on the conservation, ecology, environment end of biology. I do a lot of the travel learning courses with our department, so we certainly can get into those really cool experiences later on in this session. I do research with students. I'm really a freshwater ecologist is my area of expertise, and so I do experiments with my students in the summer, looking at things like biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity in freshwater ecosystems, and what does that mean? What is freshwater salinity and the impacts of sort of road salt runoff have on freshwater communities? That's a recent project. So those are some of the things that I do.
Great, and Dr. Reichard?
All right, hi everybody. I'm Dustin Rikard. This is my 5th year at Ohio Wesleyan, so I'm still pretty new, started in 2015. I also teach organisms in their environment, so the intro class, and my upper levels are ornithology, evolution, behavioral endocrinology, so hormones and behavior, essentially. And I also teach a class that's targeted at non-majors called animal reproduction, where we learn all about animal sex, why it happens, and it's usually a pretty popular and fun one. The focus of my research is ornithology. I study birds, bird behavior. Most of the questions that I investigate focus on animal communication, so things like how noise and human-induced changes in the environment affect how birds are communicating. And I'm also really interested in how hormones affect their behavior, and also how their behavior feeds back on their hormones. So for example, if you were to go and punch someone in the face, it's not only going to affect their hormones from getting punched, but it's also going to affect yours because you were just in an interesting competitive interaction. So those are the types of questions I ask, but birds rather than humans.
Thank you both. Before we get into the meat of the zoology program, I'm curious to know how each of you are doing. How has the transition been to online learning? Maybe what have you learned about yourself or your students in the process? Dr. Downing?
Yeah, great question. I don't think any of us signed up for this job to do it remote learning. I've managed to transition fine. I'm still in contact quite closely with all of my students via email or via Google Hangouts on a regular basis, so I get to see their faces still quite a bit. Recording lectures, making creative assignments that can be done more remotely. But one thing I have very much learned is that a lot of the joy and pleasure that I take in this job is the direct interaction with students. And without that piece, this job's a lot harder because that's where so much of the positive energy comes from, is interacting with the students in our classes. So that's been the most challenging part, is we took away the best part of the job, and we still have the rest remaining. But the learning, I think, has still been quite good. My student feedback has been quite positive. Despite the remote learning challenges, I think we've all managed to still learn quite a bit and get a fair bit out of the experience.
Great. Dr. Reichard?
Yeah, ditto to everything that Dr. Downing just said. It's been really challenging, extra challenging for me because my wife and I just had our first baby on February 15th, so right before everything got super crazy. So I haven't been sleeping, and my job is completely different than it ever has been in a lot of ways. So that's been tough. One of the biggest challenges for me is I'm teaching ornithology right now, which has a lab which is largely field-based in the second half of the semester. We go out and we identify birds, we catch them, we put bands on their legs so that we can keep track of them in the future. So really my favorite part of the lab was kind of stolen away, where we get to go out and actually apply all these things, and I get to see people hold birds for the first time. So it was interesting to make that transition. I found that there's actually a lot of people that do live streams of their bird feeders from all over the country. So I was able to take advantage of that, and my students were actually able to see some real birds virtually that we could never see going out in Ohio, because they could view cameras in Ontario and West Texas and New York. So that's been kind of interesting, and I think in a way that's opened up some alternative approaches to teaching this class that I hadn't really considered before. And it's also been interesting to kind of distill my lectures down into what's absolutely essential for the students to know. So instead of, thinking, oh, I have to fill 50 minutes, now I'm going to do, 3 10-minute lectures and just hit the essentials and then kind of work from there. And so it's been kind of exciting and interesting in that way. And I think it'll be helpful to have this experience moving forward as I continue to refine my classes. I'm still pretty new at this.
Good. I'm glad you talked about labs. I wondered if either of you were teaching labs. Dr. Downing, do you have any labs this semester that you've had to adapt?
Yeah, great question. I'm involved with 2 classes with labs. One of the classes was marine biology, and fortunately it was a travel learning course. and most of the field portion was over our spring break. So we were actually on this tiny remote island in the middle of the Caribbean off the coast of Belize when all of this crazy stuff started happening with the country closing down, and it was questionable whether we were going to make it back, but we all did. It was all fine, and we were fortunate to get the bulk of our fieldwork done just in the nick of time before the students at Ohio Wesleyan had to disperse. And the second half of that class, the students, it's a class that combines field work, which we got done in Belize, with mathematical modeling. So the students do mathematical models in a programming language called R. And we've been fortunate to be able to do all of that remotely through lots of meetings like this with students. So we've managed that class just fine. The introductory course, Organisms in Their Environment, was a little bit like what Dr. Reichard mentioned. A lot of the cool field labs happened in the spring. And so unfortunately, we had to convert those to other kinds of labs. But one of the things that class did was worked on some model simulations of epidemiological models that were relevant to class and also clearly relevant to what's happening with COVID. So we were able to adapt that class in a way that was very relevant for what's going on today, even though it wasn't quite what we would have maybe normally covered in the semester. So in both cases, we managed. So yeah, good question.
That's great. So we do have some questions that came in ahead of time prior to the session, and I will remind our audience as well that there is a feature on this where you can submit questions live through the Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to try to get to those during the course of our session today as well. But I wonder if we could start with sort of a basic question and have you tell us a little bit more about OWU's zoology program. Sort of what majors are offered within the department, how common is it for a college or university to have a department of zoology, and we'll kind of go from there. Who wants to start with that?
All right,
ahead,
I'll
Amy.
take a stab at that. Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the question about zoology. A zoology department is indeed not a common feature of a lot of universities, especially small universities our size. Frankly, it's partly a historical issue that we have a separate zoology and botany microbiology department, and many schools have gotten rid of that division over the years and combined into a biology department. We haven't done that, and there's some advantages to having a zoology department. One of them is that we have a large number of faculty between actually our two departments, our sister department, we like to call them our sister department because we work very closely with the botany microbiology department and our department. But between those two departments, we have a lot of faculty, and in the zoology department, our faculty we have a lot more specialties represented in a department because we are Department of Zoology. So for example, we have a lot of specialty upper level classes that you might not find in a generic biology department, such as the one Dr. Reichard teaches, ornithology, vertebrate anatomy, animal behavior, comparative physiology, marine biology, ecology. So we have a lot of entomology and vertebrate zoology. We have a lot of animal-based courses, the diversity of which you might not find in another kind of program. We also then, because of that range of courses, are really good at preparing students for careers that are more animal focused. With that being said, though, I do think our zoology program is a very broad program, and certainly we don't train just people who want to go on and work with animals. It's a very, very broad. We teach pre-medical students, pre-vet students, pre-dental students, students who want to go into education or conservation, people who want to go on and do lab work. So it's a huge range, genetics, things of that sort. So I think one of the main advantages is the diversity of faculty. Let's see, what were some of the other questions? Can you remind me, Lori?
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about how many students roughly are majoring in the department and what the different major options are.
Okay, that's a great question. We have a lot of students in our department. What do we usually have? We usually graduate around 40 or so a year, would you say, Dustin? Just in our department, but that you would get even a larger number if you expand and consider related majors in the biology departments. We're usually one of the top 3 majors on campus, so we are quite popular. Therefore, we have a lot of students, which also helps us have a lot of faculty and a lot of diversity in our curriculum. The students can major in a couple of different pathways in the program. So we have a general zoology program that is well designed for students who aren't sure that they want to go on to, say, a graduate school, but maybe they want to go on and straight to get some sort of a job in various capacities. Then we have other programs like a pre-professional zoology major that prepares students for grad school of lots of different kinds. We also have tracks in pre-medicine and pre-veterinary science. So we have a variety of majors that are designed to help students. If students have a sense of what they want to do when they graduate, we have different kinds of majors that help focus them. If students don't really know, then we often recommend a general zoology major, at least to begin with. It's very broad and trains students for a lot of different options, and they can always kind of shift that major in different directions if they become more certain through time where they want to head.
Great. Dr. Reichard, I wonder if we had a question from the audience, and it's kind of specific, so you may or may not know the answer, but the question is it better for students to have a Mac or a Windows computer if they're doing the zoology program? Is there a preference or a preference in of those?
Not really. One thing that we're running into is we like for students to have laptops rather than Chromebooks or tablets, although that's also kind of rapidly changing and it's not essential. We have a number of laptops that are owned by the department that we can provide to students in labs if they don't have their own. So it's not even essential that you show up with one at all. If you do, it's great, but it's not required. The ones that we provide are actually PCs, so running Windows. If that gives you any indication, I'd say the majority of the faculty use Macs, but this divide between Macs and PCs where certain programs would run well on one and not on the other has just been rapidly diminishing. And so I don't think it's something that the students really need to worry about. PCs are cheaper. If you're looking to be cost effective, I think that's the way to go, and you're not going to be hindered by that at all on campus. We're friendly to both pretty much everywhere, including in the zoology department.
Great. Another question that came in ahead of time, the student wants to know if the zoology program at Ohio Wesleyan is a competitive one. When do you decide that that is your major, and do you have to apply separately to the zoology program and get into it? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, it's not competitive in the respect to we don't limit how many majors we take. Absolutely not. So I think the only requirement, but it's a requirement for all majors on campus, is that you have to maintain a 2.0 in that major to graduate. And but that's not. We don't have any bar in terms of becoming a major, claiming to be a major, but to graduate with a major, any major on campus, you have to have that GPA. I think there are a handful of majors on campus that might have some gateway in, but we do not.
Great. That's actually a great question. I know when my own daughter was considering different colleges and universities and was looking at zoology programs or zoo and conservation science or animal behavior programs, there were some colleges that had more limited spots and ended up appearing to be more competitive to try to get in. So let's see, another question from the audience, and either one of you can take this. Can you compare and contrast a zoology degree with an ecology and evolutionary biology degree? Dustin? I
can take that one. I guess I would encourage the students in general to not get hung up on the names of these things too much. You're going to have plenty of chances in the future to specialize if you decide to go in a particular field, particularly going on to graduate school, which is more where you'd see an ecology and evolutionary biology program. I guess I'd go back to what Dr. Downing was talking about in terms of the breadth of courses that we have here at Ohio Wesleyan. If you want your degree to be heavily emphasized on ecology and evolution, you can take upper level classes that are focused on those things. You know, I'm teaching ornithology, but it's not a class where we just learn how to ID birds. It's a class where we learn to use birds as a model system to ask questions related to ecology and evolution and behavior. So you're going to be doing all the same things here at Ohio Wesleyan as you would be somewhere getting an ecology and evolutionary biology degree, except your degree is going to have a different name. And that's not really going to matter moving forward. I mean, potential employers are going to pay attention to what your degree is called, but they're also going to be interested in the coursework that you did. And you're not going to be shut out of classes here because of the breadth that we have, which is, you know, something that separates us from other small colleges. You're going to have a greater diversity of options here than you will elsewhere.
Great. Another question that came in ahead of time. Maybe Dr. Downing, you might be able to take this one. Questions about options or paths for students who want to work in an aquatic setting, like in an aquarium or as a marine biologist.
Yeah, great question. We have some specific courses related to that, primarily for aquatic systems. We have marine biology, which is one of the classes that I teach. And so certainly that would be a course you'd want to take. But if you're interested in something more specific, like working in an aquarium, that's a little bit more sort of animal care based. And other courses that are quite relevant for that are things like animal behavior and just animal physiology, lots of very basic biology classes. So essentially your best way to get training for jobs of that sort is you need a broad training in biology first, and that training happens very well here. I've had many students go on to either graduate school, I think in most cases graduate school, but sometimes directly to working with animals, working dolphin trainers. I've had somebody, a former student who heads up the Sea Turtle Conservation Network in North Carolina. I have another student who works on the Great Lakes Grant Ecosystem granting service. So there's a huge range of options, and the most critical piece for getting jobs in those areas is not that you take lots of specialized courses in marine biology or freshwater ecology, but really that as an undergraduate level, you get a broad training in biology with some specific training in that particular area. The other advice I would say is that you'd want to take advantage, if you could, with doing things like summer internships, research experiences. You can also do directed readings with or independent research with faculty to be able to explore certain things in more depth. And that's a great way, one, to explore that interest and make sure after you've dug in a little bit more deeply that you're still interested, and two, to get some more experiences maybe on a CV or a resume to make you competitive. But basically you need to start with just a solid biology background.
Great. We've got a couple of questions that relate to travel. And I know, Dr. Downing, you talked a bit at the beginning in your intro about the travel learning course that you had in Belize. I'm wondering if we can spend just a few minutes talking about travel opportunities within the zoology department, and if you have ideas of whether or not those travel opportunities cost additional money, or if there's funding available to help students participate in them.
Sure. Yeah, we have a, well, I think that first of all, the zoology department and biology departments in general are well suited for travel learning courses because the biology is relevant globally. And so it's a really fun opportunity to be able to take students into the field and around the world, not just in Ohio, and to experience things. Marine biology is a perfect example of a course that we can teach in Ohio, and I do, but certainly taking students to that environment makes that experience that much more compelling. Same thing with biology of East Africa, which I'll let Dr. Reichard talk about in a minute, since he's on the slate to teach that next year. But so we definitely take advantage of those opportunities to take our students into the field. Those courses do come with an extra cost. That cost is known ahead of time and can range tremendously. So the marine biology class is usually under a $2,000 extra fee, but courses that travel, say, to the Galapagos Islands, which is another amazing class we offer, island biology, or the Africa course, those are a little bit more expensive because the travel to get to those places is more expensive. So that's an extra fee. There is some assistance for that, but it is something that you might want to plan for if you're interested. But I think if I see the question correctly, there was also a question about local travel as well. And I'd say we do a lot of field work just locally in Ohio. So Dr. Reichard teaches his ornithology class in Ohio, and the field work is here local. I teach ecology in Ohio, and we do the field work locally. And so we definitely take advantage of the local ecosystems, and students are very much exposed to being out in the field and understanding systems, not just in these exotic places, but also very much locally. I'll let Dr. Reichard talk about Africa and anything else he wants to add about the travel courses.
Sure. Before I forget, just locally, field-focused experiences. We have 2 research preserves that are owned, or we have access to them as part of the university. And a lot of faculty do research there. A lot of my research happens at one of them, Kraus, which is actually an area where there are owners that own the land, but we've been given access to it as a research preserve. So they can't develop it. We can go and do work there. My lab has about 40 nest boxes set up there. So we monitor house wrens during the summer. So we keep track of the nesting behavior. You get to hold baby birds. We record their songs. We take blood samples. We see if their father that's feeding them is the same father that actually sired them genetically, whether it's their real dad or not. So there's a lot of cheating that goes on in birds, and we can go and test that, you know, giving them the Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, is he the father kind of situation, which is always a lot of fun. And we measure the hormones as well. So all that's happening locally during the summer. It's integrated into my ornithology class. It's integrated into behavioral endocrinology. You don't have to pay extra for either of those. I also hire interns through the Summer Science Research Program, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit, to work on those projects. But if you want to go somewhere exciting, we are going to Tanzania for 2 weeks at the end of the spring semester next year. So this is Biology of East Africa. Similarly to all these other courses, you know, part of it is going to be learning how to identify the particular organisms that we can see there, which are some pretty extraordinary things. I mean, we're literally going to be in the Serengeti, right? But it's also going to be, again, learning about what those animals can tell us about broader ideas in ecology, evolution, and behavior. So kind of coming back to those big themes that kind of run as a thread, you know, connecting all of our courses. That's also tied into these travel learning opportunities. The East Africa islands, all these courses are generally on a 3-year rotation. So depending on when you come in, you might have one or multiple opportunities to go on these trips.
Great, and I'll just add a clarifying comment that may help answer one of the questions from our audience. So a travel learning course is sort of like study abroad in some ways, except that you're just not gone as long. So typically a study abroad, a true study abroad experience would likely be for an entire semester, maybe even an entire year or a full summer, where a travel learning course is built into your regular semester, typically the spring semester, though not always. And the travel component can be anywhere from 7, 10, 14, maybe up to 20 days, I suppose. So it really just depends on the course. And usually the travel will take place either during spring break or potentially at the end of the term in May. So it's a really great opportunity for students to have some shorter travel experiences. And you know, if you plan things right, you could do a travel learning course potentially each year that you're at Ohio Wesleyan and visit 4 different locations. I should also mention that though they do cost additional money, as was mentioned by both professors, half of that cost is covered by the university. So if you were to try to do the same trip on your own, it would cost twice as much. So, and you wouldn't have built-in professors with you, tour guides, friends on the experience as well. So they're really great opportunities for students to take advantage of. And by the way, Dr. Reichard and Dr. Downing, if you ever need a chaperone, I'm the first on your list for any of your travel learning courses. So another question that we've gotten pretty regularly is related to working at the zoo. And I'm wondering if we can spend a little bit of time talking about connections that we may have with the Columbus Zoo or other animal areas, and talk a little bit about that. So who wants to take that? Dr. Reichard?
I can start and then I'll kick it back to Dr. Downing. Neither of us have much experience with the zoo, so we're not great people to talk about this with. However, we can tell you that the zoo is very popular. It's very close by. It's only about 20-25 minutes south of campus, the Columbus Zoo. So it's probably the second best zoo in the entire country. San Diego might have us beat, I'm pretty sure. But it's an extraordinary place. It's an extraordinary resource. Every semester we have students that are doing internships at the zoo where they get, essentially, they sign up for the internship credit. They get a free pass to the zoo for that semester. They go down, they work with the keepers, they design a little research project, they write it up. So they're getting hands-on experience at the zoo. I should say they're not actually handling the animals except in very, very rare cases. So these are often observational studies, but basically you can pick whatever animal you want to spend a semester with and design a research project around that. So it's really popular. We've also, Dr. Hangeson, one of the other professors whose main research focus is animal behavior, fish in particular, she kind of spearheads the internship program. And she's also developed a seminar, which is a half-credit course in addition to the internship program that you can take, which is totally focused on research in zoos and research involving captive animals. So that's another thing we've kind of developed over the last couple of years that's taught hopefully pretty frequently moving forward, and it'll be another opportunity to engage with the zoo. There's also a small research project at the zoo that's associated with that internship, and you'll be reading papers and kind of discussing the pros and cons of doing research in captive animals, what the limitations are, and things of that nature.
Yeah, great. Dr. Reichard, and a couple of things just to add, that the internship program is available really to anybody. So any student who wants to work there can, there's really no limit. But it is, as Dr. Reichard said, not necessarily hands-on working with the animals, but it gets you into the zoo and gets you experiencing it from a different perspective than maybe you ever have as a patron of the zoo. These experiences have often been really valuable for students to figure out, whether they're really as passionate about pursuing the zoo career world or not, and also then gives them a chance to really think harder about how to get further involved with the zoo. So many of our students go on and get more of those assistant, not assistant keeper, but more internships where they're a little bit more hands-on in the zoo, and often that as a consequence of having that initial exposure of just being in and around the zoo. We also have a tremendous number of alums at the Columbus Zoo, so we have lots of connections, and it's quite common to have those alums up to campus, and they're bringing their animals with them because we have such a strong connection there. And then our students sort of have gone all parts of the country and working in various aspects of the zoo world. So we definitely have a legacy there. But another thing that often happens as well is that students do get those experiences and thought that forever that's what they wanted to do. And the experience really opened their eyes to maybe other opportunities that they hadn't considered, meaning it doesn't necessarily, some people change their mind when they're actually exposed to the environment in a different way. And that's true of all internships, which is why we really strongly encourage internships, because sometimes you have one idea of what something is and you actually go into that world and either you're extra excited because it's exactly what you wanted, or you realize maybe it's time to look at some other options. So it's a great program, accessible to everybody, and we have a lot of students interested in it. But there's certainly other aspects of our program as well.
And I think too, the Ohio Wildlife Center has been a really great resource for our students aside from the zoo. So I don't know if either of you have any additional insight about that opportunity.
Yeah, so a lot of our students want to work with animals in some way, and the zoo is one environment, but there are other ones as well that a lot of students get experience with and get very excited about. We do have another local Ohio Wildlife Center, which is more of a rescue facility. They rescue wild animals and release them sometimes, but also there's a big educational component there. And so we have a lot of students go in that direction. We have a local Stratford Ecological Center where students, we have a regular internship program with them. They have livestock, nature environments, and a lot of education there as well. Students volunteer in local vet clinics at the Humane Society. So there are a lot of other ways locally that students can get access to sort of animal care, animal husbandry, animal education that doesn't always have to revolve around the zoo as well. So very good. I'm glad you made me think about that.
Yeah, that's great. I actually am Facebook friends with several of the alums who are working in the zoo, and I'm always intrigued at what they're doing. There's one gal who has gotten to train the cheetahs in the Africa exhibit, and when they were just babies, she was posting videos of them being actually in her house where she lived, because they had to sort of take care of them 24/7. And another alum is a regular in the zoo education program, and so when you see the zoos going to high schools and elementary schools and retirement centers and colleges and talking about and educating folks about the animals, she's been one of those people. So been fun to see their progress through the field. So another question that came in from the audience, and I know we were talking about this a bit earlier, do you have a general idea of what percentage of students go on to get a graduate degree after Ohio Wesleyan? And I know we were talking before, sometimes that's hard to know because they may not go right away, they may go eventually, but who wants to tackle that one?
I can start. Yeah, we were discussing, we think it's probably somewhere between 20 and 30%. It's difficult to say. I mean, that can be any number of things, people going on to master's programs, PhD programs, medical school, veterinary school, other pre-professional programs. So I think that one thing that we really do well, particularly with the breadth of courses that we offer, is we set people up for success regardless of whether or not they want to go to graduate school. And you know, we've just in my time here, there have been a number of students that have come in, as Dr. Downing mentioned earlier, just with an interest in animals, and they weren't really sure where they wanted to go. And, you know, they might have done some internships at the zoo or at one of the animal rehab places and, you know, gotten some research experience either through a class or some other way during the summer, and then decided that they wanted to go to graduate school, and they were really able to pivot kind of halfway through their time here and, you know, go in a completely different direction, which led them towards more education in the future. Even if it seems like you hate school right now, you might decide at some point that it's kind of hard to live without it.
Great. Another interesting question, and Dr. Downing, I know you mentioned earlier the mathematical modeling part of your travel learning course. The question is, how is math used in zoology? And maybe kind of a follow-up question, what level of math is required within the various majors?
Great question. So the level of math required in the different sections of zoology, the different tracks of zoology is different. In the general zoology track, there really isn't a required math course per se. We encourage statistics, but it's not at the moment a required part of the major. So really, there is no math requirement specific to zoology. You do have to take a year of chemistry, which has some math in it. And that's true of pretty much any biology undergraduate program. In our pre-professional track, which is the one that sets you up for graduate school, medical school, dental school, all of those things, there is a math requirement, and it is 1 semester of calculus, so Calc 1, or 1 semester of calculus and then a second semester that could either be the second semester of calculus or a biostats class. So you have a year of math required for that pre-professional track, and that is based on the requirements that are expected in those graduate programs. So if you apply to a graduate program, they expect to see on your transcript that level of math, and so that's why we have it built into the major. But not only that, math in certain fields of biology is extremely important. Not in all fields, but in certain fields it's essential. And in ecology, especially if you were to go on and do research and graduate work in ecology or conservation, math is an integral part. And so I co-teach my marine course with a mathematician And it's the Calculus 1, so the first semester of Calculus is required for this class. And students are using basically math, differential equations to describe biological systems. And now we're doing it in a marine biology class, but the kind of math we're doing and the skills we're teaching is translatable to conservation, to ecology, to many, many fields in biology. And it's rare that you go anymore to a journal of current research in a particular field where you don't see math as part of a research program. So it's important in certain areas. However, if you want to go off and work in a zoo, working with animals, that's not as critical to your pathway there as it is if you, say, want to go on to graduate school and do research in a particular question, especially ecology and conservation.
Great. Quick follow-up question. Oh, sorry, Dustin, you had something to add.
Yeah, I'd say that math is going to be a part of your degree regardless. So it's not, everyone is always quick to say, and this is across the board, I'm bad at math. When anything goes wrong, you're not bad at math. You're going to be fine. We're here to help you get through it. Most of the math that you're going to have to do if you're doing general zoology and not going to do, calculus is going to be pretty basic statistics. And then there's going to be some integrated into the chemistry. So it's not going to be a barrier to you being able to complete the major. That's why we're here, to help you get through it and become better at math, because we all can do that.
Great. So follow-up question, one of our audience members wants to know if you could talk a little bit more about the biostats course, maybe a high-level overview of that class.
Yeah, there are actually a couple of different statistics courses on campus, but the one that is required for students in the pre-professional major is a calculus-based statistics course, where students learn sort of some of the theory behind statistics, and it's taught by actually a statistician in the math department. However, if students want to get just a very general level of statistics and aren't needing that particular requirement, there are other statistical options on campus that make good sense that are sort of a couple levels down. We have another one in the math department, Math 105, that gives just a much broader overview of statistics. And there's another one offered in the psychology department that many of our students take that's a very practical application of statistics. So what usually happens is students who are in zoology meet with advisors on a regular basis, and we will advise students if we think statistics would be a good course for you to take, and depending on what your interests are and what your plans are, we can direct you to what we think is the appropriate statistics course for you. Also, we teach statistics in our biology classes, and so anything you really need for zoology classes is covered in zoology, and we, as Dr. Reichard mentioned, we are there helping you through that process. And so it's not as if you're sent off and having to figure out the statistics on your own. It's built into the learning of the class, but ultimately it's helpful to have additional statistics courses depending on what you want to do. And in that case, we can direct you to the right one.
Great. So this question is one of my favorites because it specifically references the OWU connection. So clearly people were paying attention during our various presentations, and we've touched a bit on the internship opportunities through the zoo and or the Ohio Wildlife Center, which is of course one of the sort of pillars of the OWU connection. We talked a lot about travel opportunities. That's another pillar of the OWU connection. We haven't yet talked much about research opportunities, which is the third pillar. And I wonder if we could spend some time talking about the research opportunities in zoology and in the sciences. Maybe Dr. Reichard?
Whoops, I had trouble unmuting myself. Sure, I can do that. I'd say there's a couple of different ways that we can approach this question. One, so I already mentioned the Summer Science Research Program, which is a program that's restricted to just OWU students. So when you apply to this internship program, you're not competing with people around the country or around the world. It's just your peers here. The students that get hired get paired up with a faculty member, and it's not just in zoology, it's across the sciences, and you do a 10-week research project on campus. You get free housing, you get a stipend, it's paid for you to be here and do this project. You'll present the project at the end of the summer at kind of research symposium that celebrates all the research that's been done at the university over the last 6 months. And so it's kind of a big deal. The students that work with me, again, this is an opportunity for field work, you know, hands-on experience with birds. They learn how to catch them and take blood samples and take measurements and mark them and identify them and quantify their behavior, all kinds of great stuff. And there's a diversity of projects that you can do. Most of the students that get involved in that program, it happens the summer after your junior year or the summer after your sophomore year. But again, you're more likely to get one of those internships because it's just a smaller pool of applicants. Beyond that, during the semester, we have student project grants that you can apply for, which is usually to get $500 or less, but sometimes they go up as high as $1,000 to do a research project of your own design on campus. Usually that's in consultation with a faculty advisor. It may or may not be part of an internship credit that you're earning. But really, if you have an idea that you want to investigate, you can ask the university for money, and as long as it's properly justified, you can get that and then do the research project yourself. You have bigger ambitions and you want to do something that's going to cost multiple thousands of dollars or even require travel, perhaps international travel, you can apply for a theory to practice grant. We regularly send students all over the world to do research projects, again, of their own design. The ones that are most successful are usually done in consultation with a faculty advisor, but that's not always the case. And if you're afraid of flying, you don't have to go anywhere internationally to take advantage of this. In my second year, I had a student that was really interested in animal care and welfare, and she had an idea to do a project that investigated how diet affected the health of captive birds. And so we actually wrote a theory to practice grant, got over $8,000 to buy the supplies and birds that we needed to do this research on campus. We had all the skills we needed, we just didn't have the equipment, so that's what we asked for. We had 36 parakeets that were a part of this experiment, and we housed them in the basement of the Science Center and our animal quarters. And she did the experiment, and it was actually just published in a scientific journal with her as first author earlier this year. So these projects can be as big as you want or as small as you want, and you're going to find support here to get them done.
Yeah, I'll also add that research can also happen in classes. So sometimes that's how students get started, is many of our courses have built-in research projects. My marine class has two. One was in the field, where each student did an individual research project in the field in the coral reefs of Belize. And now they're each doing an independent research project using their mathematical model to explore a question. Animal behavior has students do individual research projects and so on. So some of that happens in classes, and often that's what inspires students to realize, wow, I think research and asking my own research question is kind of interesting, and that often can lead to these other experiences. I've similarly had students in a class get excited about an idea, write a theory to practice grant or a small grant for an on-campus project, and have turned it into an amazing research project. And I don't quite have a publication, but I have a first response from our first journal where I have 3 student authors. And so it looks promising. We're working on getting it published. We'll see, fingers crossed. But it was a totally student generated project that was funded through the university. So it's really, if you are inspired and interested in an idea, there's a lot of support for you to be able to pursue that idea here in either small or big ways.
Great. So this question relates a little bit about the coursework that a student might take, particularly during the freshman year, if they were thinking about zoology. Is there a sort of a typical path for a freshman, first semester, second semester, and or are there prerequisite courses, like I must take this course before I can take the next one?
I can start with that one. So when you come in your first year, there's really 2 courses that kind of make up our intro sequence, which we try and get freshmen into. The first especially is appealing to our more animal-focused people, this organisms in their environment class that both Dr. Downing and I teach. So that's one of the intro classes. The other is cellular and molecular biology, so kind of big versus small. You can take them in any order you want. It's entirely up to you. And once you get through those 2 classes, you'll pretty much be set up for any of the upper levels that you're going to take. So those are kind of the gateway classes to the rest of the major. In terms of sophomore level classes, we teach evolution and genetics as separate courses currently. And so those are at kind of the 260, 270 level. So they're targeted more at second year students. And then everything else, all those specialized courses that we've already talked about are the ones that you'll be working up towards. But it's really the organisms in their environment and the cellular and molecular biology that you get out of the way early on. Beyond that, you're going to be taking some chemistry at some point. So general chemistry 1 and 2, so a full year of chemistry. Some students choose to do that their first year and delay taking the zoology classes until the sophomore year. Others do it the opposite, delay the chemistry. And some people who are particularly bold decide to do them all at once. The reason why that's challenging is that these science courses not only have the normal 3 hours of lecture every week, but you also have a 3-hour lab on top of that. So our science classes, you're getting 1.25 credits, and that extra 0.25 is the hours that you're spending in lab each week. And so compared to your non-science majors, it's going to feel like you're in class more, and that's because you are. And that's what makes it a little bit more challenging to kind of shoulder multiple science classes in their first year, but students do it on a regular basis, and students do it very successfully. It's totally up to you whether you start chemistry your first year or your second. You're going to be able to graduate on time regardless of what you decide.
I was going to ask a sort of generalized question. What percentage of the zoology classes do include a lab? Is it more than 75%?
Yeah, most of our classes have a lab. In fact, I think there's only about 3 that don't. Genetics has an optional lab. Evolution does not have a lab, and conservation that I teach does not have a lab. But I think the rest of them do have labs. And so, am I wrong? Am I right?
Herpetology.
Oh, and herpetology. So that's 4 out of however many we have, 30 or so. So yeah, for sure, most of our classes have labs. We think labs are really fun, frankly, and it's where a lot of excellent learning happens. It's also where we really get to know our students, because it's not in the classroom setting, but we're working closely with groups of students, asking really cool questions, hands-on in the lab. So we love labs, and actually we would probably prefer to teach all of our classes with labs, but some of them we do without labs just in order to get some content through and have a little bit less contact time for faculty as well, so that we can cover our curriculum. So absolutely, labs are just part of the culture of science classes, and I think our biology students generally really love the labs.
Great. So this question is perhaps more general, but I think applicable to any faculty member in any department, but it's related to tutoring. How is tutoring handled at Ohio Wesleyan? And maybe you can take that from the approach of how often are faculty helping students? Are there student-to-student or peer-to-peer resources? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can start with that one. From a faculty perspective, we're always very happy if you come and talk to us, but often we're very scary and people try and find other ways to get their questions answered that don't involve talking to us. Most of us are really accessible over email, and we also have office hours, so times during the week that we've literally set aside in our schedule where we're hoping to meet with students. You're not required to come to those. Those are just times where our doors guaranteed to be open, and we're there, hoping that people are going to stop by and have questions about our classes. But in our experience, not very many students take advantage of them, which is unfortunate. That's why we're here, to interact with you. We were just talking about how much we miss that being online. So please, if you come here, come and talk to us. We're starved for attention. But beyond that, we have the Academic Resource Center, which organizes, I think, all of the tutoring now for the intro courses, at least, on campus. And so we have tutors that are hired. These are upper level students that have already completed our intro courses, so both the organisms and their environment and the cellular and molecular biology. And they have tutoring hours that are open in the evenings at certain nights during the week. And you can also schedule times to meet with them to get your questions answered about your classes. In the upper levels, there's less structure with the tutoring. If you feel like you need a tutor, you can always ask your professor if there's a student that was in the class before or another student that's in the class with you currently that you might reach out to establish some tutoring. That's happens from time to time. And also, we've been working to develop a mentorship program for our first year students coming in, that'll actually pair you up with an upper level zoology, biology student who will kind of meet with you over the course of your first year and serve as a sounding board if you have questions, if you're struggling with classes, kind of help you, learn the ropes of what it's like to be a science major at Ohio Wesleyan. So we're really putting an effort into providing more support, especially during that first year, in terms of resources to ensure that you're managing the workload, doing well in your classes and getting your questions answered and having a good time.
That's really helpful. Another question, and I know that both of you probably have good advice for this, but any tips for a student wanting to participate in both classes, zoology degree, for example, and a sport? How do you balance those two things, especially in a science program like zoology that's very lab heavy?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, I'll just say we have a lot of student athletes in the zoology department, so it's absolutely doable. Another thing that I always love to point out is that our student athletes tend to be that have a higher GPA than our non-student athletes. So it's also very possible to be a very good student and be an athlete at the same time. Being in the sciences does present some additional challenges because of the labs, because many of our labs happen in the afternoons, like say from 1 to 4 is a common lab time. And sports teams practices start at 4. Sometimes you have to leave early for an out of town match. So things that work though, those sorts of conflicts usually can be worked out. So you usually know your competition schedule ahead of time. Often you know that, say, X sport tends to have away games on Thursdays. Then you can usually avoid taking a Thursday afternoon lab, for instance. So maybe not your first year, you haven't figured that out yet, but eventually you get pretty good at that. Also, faculty by and large are pretty understanding as long as students handle things responsibly if they have to miss for a competition. In addition, the coaches are understanding. If you always show up 10 or 15 minutes late to practice because your organic or your chemistry lab went till 4, coaches are accommodating of those sorts of things. So it's very possible. And in fact, a lot of the zoology faculty are what are we called? Faculty mentors of different sports teams. So for example, I'm a faculty mentor for the women's soccer team. We have a faculty mentor of the women's volleyball team. One of us is the faculty member of the golf team. So the faculty in zoology are very supportive of the sports teams on campus.
One other tip that I'll provide, given that my daughter is a student athlete and a zoology major, this may not apply to everybody, but she was fortunate to come into Ohio Wesleyan with a couple of college credits from the College Credit Plus program, which I know is super popular in Ohio. And so for her first year in particular, she took advantage of having come in with those credits to reduce her course load during her season. So in the spring semester, when the track season was really heavy, she ended up taking 3 1/4 credits or classes instead of 4 1/4, and it didn't put her behind at all because she had come in with those credits. So not that you have to come in with credits to finish in 4 years or to balance your academics and your athletics, but that is one tip that you could utilize if in fact you are coming in with any college credits from your high school experience. So we are nearing the end of our hour together, and I know we didn't get to all of the questions exactly the way they were asked, but I want to, looks like we just got another one. And I think either one of you could answer this. Can you explain the difference between our credit system and a more typical credit system that you might find, where our classes are 4.25 as a typical semester, where somewhere else might be 12 to 18? Who wants to take that?
Well, a typical course without a lab on our campus counts as 1 credit. So you can imagine four credits would be 4 courses, say an English class, a psychology class, a history class, and a language class. However, when we have labs like we do in the sciences, you get an extra 0.25 credit in recognition that you're doing that extra work for the lab. So to maintain a full load, you'd basically take 4 courses, one with a lab, or sometimes You can do activity credits that are 0.25 units. So there's some other courses that add up to, that are in that 0.25 unit credit. General rule is you take 4 classes plus that little extra, whether it's a lab course or something else, to maintain, to stay on track to graduate in 4 years. Our students in the sciences never have a problem because they always have those extra 0.25s from their lab courses. And so, yeah, I think, does that explain it, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. And you can kind of think it in big terms. We require 34 units of credit to graduate. And so that's 8.5 a year and 4.25 a semester. So to me, it's easier to keep track of than the more challenging classes that are 3, 4, or 5 semester hours. The math's a little bit easier for Ohio Wesleyan, I think. So we're just now at our time. I wonder if Dr. Downing and or Dr. Reichard have any sort of bits of advice or wisdom or nuggets about maybe the benefits or the differences between Ohio Wesleyan Zoology program and others, what makes it unique. Any parting words of wisdom?
I guess I would just kind of echo what Dr. Downing said earlier about the benefits of us being split between zoology and botany microbiology. So when we look at our peer institutions that just have biology programs, we have more biology faculty overall than those programs. And the big benefit of that, not only are you going to have more faculty to reach out to and form these relationships with, but you're also going to have a greater diversity of classes to take than you are at other schools of similar size. So I think that's one thing that really separates us. I think it's one of our strengths, besides the fact that all the faculty are awesome, but obviously I'm biased. So I just kind of keep that in mind, and I encourage you to, look at the course offerings at the different places that you're applying and think about, okay, what are my 4 years going to look like here versus what are my 4 years going to look like at Ohio Wesleyan? And I think you're going to be impressed with the breadth and diversity of options that we're going to offer to you.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Dr. Reichard said. We are awesome. No, we are a great group of faculty. We love working with our students. We have a lot of research opportunities. And I do think if you look at the coursework options, you can kind of create and craft a major out of, we have specific majors, but you can craft the courses that you take in a way that's very specific to your interests because we have such a variety of courses. And so even if you don't know yet what it is you want to specialize in, you will have time and the ability to play around and maybe hone in to pretty specialized courses as you pursue your 4 years here. Also, our department is really engaged in the broader, really neat OWU connection experiences like we brought up. Lots of really neat travel learning experiences. Our students are great. We love our students. They're active on our campus. They're campus leaders. And so you would have this built-in peer group with other majors in the department that I think is a huge plus as well to our program.
That's great. Thank you both, Dr. Downing and Dr. Reichard, for joining us tonight and sharing your expertise with our audience. I know you all have lots on your plate, and so I certainly appreciate your willingness to take time out of your busy days. I'll just close by reminding our audience that if we didn't get to your question, I would encourage you to feel free to reach out to myself, or you'll notice on the screen we've listed both Dr. Downing and Dr. Reichard's email addresses. I know that they would be happy to respond to any specific questions that you might have about Ohio Wesleyan in general or about zoology in particular. Also, a reminder that we do have a number of additional Bishop Plus sessions coming up. Next week, we're offering 3 different sessions. They are sessions that we offered at the beginning of April that we are repeating during this last week for folks who may not have gotten to attend in earlier April. So those are available. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're putting together a full complement of Bishop Plus sessions for the month of May, including topics like athletics. There will be an alumni panel. We'll dive a little bit deeper into study abroad and study away options, as well as career opportunities and internships. And then we have some other major specific sessions on education, psychology, the arts, and we'll also be doing one on being an undecided student and how you get towards choosing a major eventually. So if you've enjoyed the Bishop Plus sessions thus far, I do encourage you to continue taking a look at the list of opportunities and join us when you can. I'll also put a plug in. This week is the last week that our faculty are offering our virtual online courses. We had about 20 faculty that were teaching courses in a synchronous way that would allow our prospective students to join if they would like to. Since those are ending soon, we've asked some faculty if they'd be willing to offer mock classes. And so each Tuesday in the month of May, we're calling them Teaching Tuesdays, and we'll be offering a handful of mock classes that you might choose to attend, where the faculty member will present a lecture interactively with those of you that are on the Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate call with them. So encourage that as well. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us this evening. Don't hesitate to reach out to Dr. Reichard, Dr. Downing, or myself if you do have any questions that come up. We hope to see you at a future virtual session and hopefully at some point back on campus in the flesh. So enjoy your evenings and have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.